Well, thank you everyone for joining us for our second ever TCup talks. My name's Rebecca. I'm a filmmaker and a freelance content editor for TCup. And I'm delighted to welcome Colin Brown as our guest today to talk all things culture. The talk's going to be around 25 minutes, so I hope you've all grabbed a cup of tea or maybe a mince pie. And just a quick introduction to TCup Talks. So TCup Talks sprang to life as a way to share the expertise of the TCup team and our partners. And our hope is that by sharing our experiences in relation to wellbeing, we can help individuals and organisations move one step closer to having a positive and proactive approach to wellbeing. And speaking of positive and proactive approaches to wellbeing, Colin Brown, our guest, is here with us today. Colin is the former Managing Director of Softcat, where he was described as the custodian of culture. Before that, he worked for Microsoft UK. So he knows a thing or two about leading large teams and getting the best out of his people. So I'm going to hand over to Colin now. And Colin, if you could just tell us a bit more about your background, what your role is at TCup and why you got involved with TCup, that would be great.
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca, and very good morning to everybody. Yeah, just a little bit about me then. As Rebecca has just said, I just stepped down after 8 years as Managing Director of Softcat, who are one of the largest IT reseller solution providers in the UK. We provide services to corporate and public sector customers. And for Softcat, culture was a big differential. It was very important for us when I worked there to make sure that all of our staff, all of our employees, all of our teams were focused on providing the very best service for customers. And I think every organisation would want to provide the best customer service. Kind of be foolish not to say that. But where I think Softcat did a great job and where we did a great job and where we differentiated ourselves is that we had a deep understanding that you can only provide a great customer service if you have the highest level of engagement from your employees. So the culture for us was very, very important. So Softcat was a big success. We grew the business over those 8 years from about 300 people to about 1,600 people. And from a revenue perspective, from about 300 million to 1.5 billion organically. So it was a pretty exhausting period, great fun, lots of hard work, lots of growth, as I've just said. And I'm happy to be stepping back from that a little bit and taking a little bit of a breather. But yes, part of that and working with so many people and recruiting so many people was one thing that got me very focused on culture, on employee wellbeing, and how to make the best of that, both for your organisation and for your customers.
Brilliant. And how would you define culture? It's a kind of buzzword. What does it mean to you? Is it the social aspect? Is it the things that the company values? What is it? Yeah.
I mean, as you say, culture can, and I think very fairly, can be adapted or interpreted differently within an organisation or by an individual. So culture is something that I think it's a great question, because I think for an organisation, whether that's a private company, a publicly limited company, or a public sector organisation, I think defining what your culture is a really important thing to do, and then sharing that and getting buy-in to it. The way I think of culture is in a few ways. Really, probably the best way to describe it in a one-liner is that the culture is your DNA. It's what makes you. It's what everybody is made up of. If it's a successful culture, that is. And you mentioned values. I think values, a mission, and a strategy are all very important. Values should really try and articulate, how we do things around here. What are our values? What should you expect from people? What should we expect from each other? And why that's really important as well is when you're bringing new people into an organisation, whilst they don't know their new colleagues, they should know what to expect from them in terms of behaviour, in terms of how they help people and how they work for each other as well. And those values can cover a lot of things, both internally and externally, to customers, to the partners that an organisation works with. But it is really, really most important for the employees themselves. And then I think I mentioned a mission. I think having a mission is really important as well, because the way I always think of that is that your mission is the company's North Star. If everybody closes their eyes and points to the same direction, then you're in a good place. If you tell people to close their eyes and point and everyone points in very different directions, then your company's probably got people who are working in slightly different directions and maybe against each other as well. So I think having a mission or a North Star is very important as well. And then your strategy feeds into that. But I think the strategy is something that's something more for shareholders and for external. I think the values and the mission are the most important things. And the reason culture is so important is that it can bring people along. It creates momentum within an organization. And when things are going really well, the culture is very much a part of that. And then reflecting on recent events, if things aren't going really well, or if there's some external reasons, the pandemic being a great example, I think having a strong culture will help bring you through that. It will help keep people coordinated, it'll encourage people to help each other, etc. And I think that strong culture actually it's almost like having a fully charged battery at the start of this pandemic, which is kind of going down a little bit. But nevertheless, it's something that culture is something that keeps people firing and keeps people going as well. So I think culture is very important. It's very different to having rules and guidelines and things like that. When we were at Softcat, we had one simple guideline, which was use good judgment. If you know what everybody's about and you know what you can expect of people, you don't need to look at a rule book, just use good judgment and you'll probably come to the right decision at the end of the day. So culture can work across all of those things. And you also mentioned the fun word. It's very important for fun as well. I think having fun and making sure that work isn't just a place you go to and do stuff and then go away from. If you can make your workplace fun and creative and have people who have real friends there, then that's going to be a big bonus as well. It really does help people just enjoy their job, and from an organizational point of view, clearly that helps with productivity as well. So cuts across all of those things really.
Fantastic. And from your experience, how does culture link to wellbeing? You mentioned the pandemic there. What is the link, would you say?
Yeah, I think there's a big link between culture and employee well-being. I think if you start from the fact that over recent generations, over the last sort of 10, 20 years, and this is accelerating all the time, I think people want to do a job or be part of an organization where they feel that they're contributing, they're part of something bigger, and their role there, whilst they might have a role, a task, a function, they know that what they're doing is part of something bigger and they're contributing to something. I think that helps with the whole mental well-being and understanding about why they're doing what they're doing. And as I say, they don't just see it as a task, a clocking in and a clocking out kind of thing as well. If you're working around and with people that you trust, you like, you enjoy being with, that means that you're going to be happier as well. So that well-being. And then there's the responsibility that employers have these days, and we did a lot of work on this about just making sure that we provide ways and means that people can be healthy in every way, whether that's through creating opportunities for people to do activities, whether that's a gym, whether that's having a football team or a hockey team or whatever. We made sure that people took a 1 hour lunch break every day. Sounds a bit obvious, doesn't it? But yeah, as I'm sure a lot of people wouldn't be surprised to hear that. Many people feel pressure to skip the lunch break, to have the sandwich at the desk and do things like that. So that work-life balance is something that if you have that as part of your culture, which is when you're at work, you work hard, you contribute, you're engaged. When you're out of work, we don't expect anything from you. We don't email people in the evenings and things like that. All of those things come together, I think, to give people just that better well-being and make them emotionally buy into the fact that what they're doing is worthwhile and something that they enjoy doing. It's not just something they're doing to get the wage check at the end of the month. So those are very important. And as you say, that the pandemic, I think, has just highlighted that, where looking after people, knowing that there are people to help you there. At the start of the pandemic, we created a buddy system so that people would have somebody to talk to other than their manager if it was things that they didn't feel comfortable about. We had mental health first aiders who were on hand as well for people to talk to. I think that culture, if you get the culture right, it creates a transparency and openness that means that people are happy to talk about stuff like that and not bottle it up. And as we all know, if you bottle it up, it's only going to get worse, and things will deteriorate, and people might just vote with their feet then and say, right, well, I'm not coming to work at all. I mean, during the pandemic, the number of people who rate their mental health as very poor has increased by more than 3 times from the start of the pandemic to the end. That's a McKinsey report that just came out recently. And another report I read literally just a few days ago, which is right up to date, that said that mental health is now accounting for 41% of absences in the workplace as well. It's an incredible number, really. So I think all of that culture just feeds into that. By the way, it doesn't mean to say that individual people won't have different problems caused by different external factors. It's not panacea, it's not a cure-all, but I do think it's proven that having that strong culture just makes sure that people just feel happy about where they are and what they're doing, and the general daily lives, which includes work. The daily life shouldn't equal work, but it certainly includes work.
And you gave a few examples there. How do you think companies or leaders can sort of cultivate a culture in a way that feels authentic and sustainable rather than gimmicky or forced?
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting, and again, there's a lot of reports. I've just referenced a few reports that are coming out about mental health and well-being as a direct result of this being amplified by the pandemic, and you just implied it there, if not stated it, that I think a lot of companies will say, right, we have to be doing something about this. We have to be seen to be looking after our people, and it's going to be a little bit forced and a little bit cliched and a little bit gimmicky, to use the word that you use, Bex. It's still better that they're doing that, and hopefully, at least starting there, we'll get them to the point where it does become authentic. But I think you have to have that authenticity of leadership in the first place, and so if you have that, you have openness, you have transparency, you have the ability to have two-way questions. You can actually initiate intentional listening. So you can have leaders that really listen to their people, and people that trust the leaders to be able to hear the message that they want to deliver. And I think that comes from that openness, that transparency, leaders who are prepared to go and do that. I think leadership, especially over the last few months, I think leaders need to be prepared to be open about their own vulnerabilities as well. I mean, it's a balance to make. I don't think you want leaders standing in front of the whole company and saying, I can't cope with this. That's not really going to be leadership that helps the company overall. But I do think you need leaders to be open about their own vulnerabilities, the struggles they're having, and just the humanness that that they may be dealing with, whether it's a grandmother or whether it's the childcare that they're struggling with. You could name about 20, 30, 40 different ways that we've all been struggling over these last 9 months. And I think having that openness and that vulnerability will help again, just to persuade people to be a bit more open about what they're feeling as well. And really simple things like, when you do ask the question, how are you feeling, how are you coping? We're British. 9 times out of 10, their first answer is going to be, yeah, it's all right. I'm not too bad, really. A simple tip, and I actually learned this from a really good friend of mine who's been a Samaritan for over 10 years. He just said, ask that question 2 times, maybe 3 times. When you get that first answer of, yeah, I'm doing all right, ask it again. Yeah, but are you really feeling all right? How are you feeling? And again, I think if you've got leaders who are prepared to have a conversation that's not just going to be a chat in the corridor, so to speak, it might end up opening up into a long dialogue with somebody to really try and get to grips with what they're feeling about. I think that will help. So I think it's just that the authenticity and the openness and the transparency and the trust. If you've engendered that trust with your employees in the first place, then that will go much further to actually be able to help with this challenge.
And as a leader yourself at Softcat and Microsoft and the places before, did you find that quite an easy thing to do, or hard? Were you quite open to being vulnerable yourself?
Yeah, I personally think it's quite an easy thing to do. I think part of being a good leader is being able to have those conversations with everybody. And I'll use a cliche here, from the guy who delivers the mail to the finance director. I think treat everybody the same. They're all contributing to the organisation in one way or the other. So I think from a personal perspective, yes. I think one point I would put in is, I worked at Microsoft. It's quite a while ago now. It's about, if you go back 8 to 10 years ago, and the overall culture in Microsoft then was not as good as it is now. I think Satya Nadella, who's come in and runs Microsoft today, has done a brilliant job of transforming the culture. Back then, it was less healthy. It was much more results driven. So I think your question raises an interesting challenge that even as a leader oneself, so I would think I can be open and transparent, but if the overall culture of the organisation is different, then that's going to rub against you. So I think that's why it's important to get everybody to buy into that culture. And some people will be better at it than others, by the way. Not everybody is natural, just being open and transparent and having that chit chat about all sorts. But you still want them to be genuine and be authentic, and they will be in their own particular way. And by the very definition of the word authentic, you want them to do it in their own particular way and not to try and be something different to what they are. So I think that raises that important point about getting everybody from the leadership to buy into that approach and that style of management and leadership.
Sure, that's a really good point about sort of people doing it in their own way and not a sort of prescribed way.
Yeah.
And you know, you were at Softcat when they were smaller and watched them sort of grow quite rapidly. Does it work differently for smaller teams, and how do you manage it when the teams do get really large?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just have to be realistic and say it does work differently. You know, when I joined Softcat, there was about 300 people. I wouldn't quite say I knew everybody's name. I tried very hard, but I wasn't far off that. When you get to 1,000, 1,200, 1,500, that's impossible. So I think that does create different challenges, and you have to come up with different ways of ensuring that that culture evolves, and also as time goes on, culture evolves and how people do things evolves. So what was fun and great and acceptable in 2012 is different to what it is in 2020, because the world has just changed at that point in time. So I think there's a real onus on the leadership team to make sure that they keep reinventing and renewing and refreshing that. One of the things that we did in Softcat, and then this wouldn't work for everybody, but one of the things that we did in Softcat was, despite it not always necessarily being the right commercial thing to do, we continued to open new offices around the UK. And one of the real drivers for that was, I mean, there was some good business reasons, proximity to customers, things like that. But one of the real drivers, you know, right up there in the top 3 reasons why we did that, was because we were creating new small businesses within a bigger business. We would open those new offices with existing Softcat people. We would only do that if we could get existing staff to go and do that, and they would build up slowly, and they would create their own culture within the overall framework of the Softcat DNA. So it was great. You know, when you set up Softcat Glasgow, you weren't trying to get Softcat Glasgow to be a facsimile of Softcat London. You know, Glasgow and London, very different places. You wanted the Softcat DNA to sort of flow through like the letters in a stick of rock, but you wanted them to create their own culture as well. So, you know, I guess my summary from that would be, as a leadership team, you need to constantly be talking about your culture, your people, much more than your business even. And I really mean that, much more than your business. You've got smart people doing the business. And, you know, we had a leadership team every Monday morning. And I would say 2/3 of that was talking about our people and 1/3 about our business. And that's how much I think you really need to focus on it. And the results will then, you know, look after themselves if you do that. And I guess the other obvious thing to say, a difference between small businesses and big businesses, is affordability of some of these things as well. So, you know, you can, I don't know, a cycle to work scheme, or, you know, we'll put a gym in or a crash in place. That might not be affordable for small organizations. So I think it's just about having that creativity and working on what, and this actually comes back to the transparency and the trust with your people. Speak to your people about what is the most important thing to you. How can we help you? You know, is it more important that we put a crash in place, or is it more important that you have free lunch vouchers, or is it more important that we take everybody away on a trip every quarter just to, you know, make sure that we're getting that team togetherness? So, but get the feedback, and that again comes back to that culture of openness and transparency in the first place.
Amazing, yeah. And talking about being more creative and sort of inventing new ways of working. Since the pandemic, obviously a lot of businesses have moved to working from home. You know, and things like the social side of a culture or gyms or whatever aren't really possible at the moment. So what ways would you encourage leaders or organizations to sort of still harness that culture and have teams bonding with each other when they can't be together in person in an office?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's that question has been rife amongst every organisation over the last 8 or 9 months, and yeah, many organisations have been through the right. We're going to do all the Zoom quizzes. We're going to do our we'll do I don't know, cooking a pizza Friday or something like that, and getting everyone together. We open the beer fridge at 5 o'clock on Friday, and everybody's on on the calls together. So all of those things are important, and I think they go some way to replace it. Well, they're much better than nothing, clearly, aren't they? They're not as good as the real thing and getting everybody together, but they're much better than nothing. And I think again, getting the people within the business. This is the one thing that we did at Softcat. March, April time was we asked a bunch of people to get together and for them to come up with the ideas, not because we were lazy and didn't want to do it from a leadership team perspective ourselves, but I think if they have the ideas and we gave them a budget for this as well, and just said, right, come up with some ideas and work out what you think will be best. And so having that sort of voice from the workforce, we think made it much more successful than a bunch of us oldies would have maybe managed to do in our place. The one thing I would say on top of that, though, about that culture and that transparency piece, especially when you're trying to tap into how people are feeling, the one thing that I would urge leadership teams to do and management teams to do, though, is just keeping up that contact and not necessarily doing it in a. I mean, you can't. Again, I couldn't phone up 1,500 people and check up to see how they're doing. That wasn't going to happen. But you can kind of split that up between your management team, and if you do a lot of not unscheduled calls, just literally phoning people up and checking how they are, and kind of taking them by surprise a little bit and having a 5 or 10 minute chat with them. Again, that's not as good as standing in the corridor having a chat or a cup of tea or a cup of coffee with somebody, but it's better than nothing. And then the other thing I think that we talked a lot about is being realistic about where we are and when we think we're going to get back to normal. What is the new normal? All of those sorts of things. I think it's really important not to sort of set up false hope for people, and there's been a few false starts, as we know, over the last few months. So I think just taking it one step at a time and focusing on the now. The things that you can control rather than the things that you can't control is very important as well. And getting people to make the best of what there is now and sort of count your blessings as to what we've got, as opposed to crying for the things that we haven't got anymore. That's not really that useful. So yeah, I'd love to have a really great answer to your question about what particular Zoom party or quiz night or things like that. But just do lots of stuff. Just make sure it keeps coming. But also don't assume that means as a result of that, you're keeping everybody happy. You also have to have that intentional listening and check in with people and make sure that that you understand their true feelings as well.
And obviously, an organisation like TCup, where it's at the heart of, wellbeing is at the heart of the TCup app, and it is sort of, I guess, in your pocket and can be rolled out amongst organisations. I just want to mention, so you're obviously you're a non-exec director for TCup. What made you want to get involved with TCup?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. There's two parts to that. One, why did I want to get involved with TCup? Really, it is because I have seen firsthand, as I say, over the last sort of 7-8 years, employed probably employed 2,000 people and not retained all of those for various different reasons. So I've had firsthand view of how people struggle with the challenges at work, struggle with everything these days, the affordability of trying to live. We employ a lot of graduates and they come up with a debt that they're living somewhere that they can't afford and probably aren't getting actually paid enough money at the start of their career. So I've just seen firsthand how much people struggle and how much that impacts their work life as well. And when I was introduced to TCup, I just thought, I mean, again, nothing is the magic answer, but what TCup as an organisation is doing, I think ticks boxes on either side of that equation. For an organisation, it enables them to tap into and keep track of and have much more up-to-date information about how their employees are feeling, and it also answers to some degree, I think, something which is there's a real duty of care these days for an employer to check in with their people and make sure that we know how they are. So it's an enabler of that. And then for the individuals themselves, as you say, it's an app that you can put in your phone and have in your pocket 24/7. It's simple to use. You can, just 5 minutes a day will start to create this baseline about how you're feeling. And it's not just a mental health thing, it's about your physical health as well. It's like, and that's another thing that the pandemic has caused a lot of people to do is, I'm not getting to the gym the way I used to be able to do it. It's not just that they can't go and do activity. Sometimes you just fall into this trough of not wanting to as well. I'm just in my pajamas 24/7 and just don't get out and stuff like that. If you start recording that and start measuring that and noticing, wow, my exercise has really tailed off. I'm not hydrating. I'm not drinking enough water. I'm eating really badly. So as a way of keeping a record of those things, I think it helps individuals just gives them that boost to be able to look and check in on themselves as well. So I think TCup's a great enabler. And I think whilst many organizations, almost all organizations today will do an annual employee survey, maybe even a quarterly one, things like this. I just think this is amplified that we need to do more now. I think the focus on care, connection, and well-being needs to be hardwired into an organization's operating model now, and TCup is a great tool that will enable them to do that.
Thank you so much. We've run out of time now, amazingly, but that's all. I've so much food for thought there. Thank you so much, and thank you to everyone for joining. You can follow TCup on social media if you don't already, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and use the hashtag TCup Talks. And we'll post a link to this recorded webinar if you want to share it. And keep your eyes peeled about our upcoming TCup talks. And we hope to see you for the next one.